Is it finally time for a new Banjo Kazooie game? Let's talk about it. Hey guys, Mike here. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you could do me a favor and please subscribe. Most of you watching are not subscribed. Give the video a thumbs up and comment your thoughts at the end. That would be great. I do a bunch of pop culture content on this channel and I'm growing and growing, so I'd love to have you along for the ride. Okay, let's get into the vid. So if you were born in the 90s, you almost definitely played Banjo Kazooie or its sequel Banjo-Tooie on your Nintendo 64. Just thinking about this game gives me massive nostalgia, like insane levels of nostalgia. This game and the sequel were just incredible, groundbreaking for their time, developed by Rare, who were an incredible studio out of the UK, right? Who had developed games like Donkey Kong Country, which is one of my favorite games of all time. They also developed the Goldeneye game on Nintendo 64, plus games like Donkey Kong 64, Banjo Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie, Perfect Dark. They were really good at making games. Basically, they were 3D platformers, almost built off the success of Super Mario 64, but in my opinion, they took the basis of Super Mario 64 and made it better. You would learn moves, get upgrades, the worlds were more interesting. The music, in my opinion, was better. It was composed by the great Grant Kirkhope, who is one of the best composers in gaming. Seriously, some of his tracks in these games are mind-blowingly good and I can still sing along to them literally nearly 30 years after I played the game. But these games were just really good in, like, they were fun to control, it felt good to play them, and there was just like this nice dopamine hit of exploring and collecting golden stuff, which was a staple of a lot of games at this time, whether it be Super Mario 64, the bloated Donkey Kong 64, even games past this generation like Jak and Daxter took on this like collect-a-thon genre as it's so known now. But I think Banjo Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie did it best. And then this series kind of went dormant after a few other games like a Game Boy Advance game and a Game Boy Advance pilot racing game. Rare was then acquired by Microsoft and eventually, and I remember being super hyped for this at the time, even though I never had an Xbox, they did a game called Banjo Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, which was, you know, the fabled return to the Banjo Kazooie franchise, except it just wasn't what people wanted. I've heard it's actually a good game, but it wasn't that style of game. It was like a game where you built cars and drove around and did stuff, not the traditional Banjo Kazooie gameplay, which I guess was really disappointing. I've never played it. I would love to one day, but I just have never had an Xbox, right? Recently, there have been these rumors online that there is a proper sequel to Banjo Kazooie in active development. And it's, you know, coming. It's not coming for a while, but it is happening and it is coming. I am skeptical, okay? I'm very skeptical. These rumors have floated on and off. I've heard many times that there is a new Banjo Kazooie game coming. I've wanted it for a very long time because I would play the shit out of it for the nostalgia, right? But I'm skeptical about these rumors, okay? Hey, while I've got you here, if you like this video, be sure to help me out by subscribing, thumbs up, comment, all of the above. Let's get back to it. There's a few things I need to talk about here because first is like, what is the commercial viability of a game like this? Because the collect-a-thon genre really kind of died off in the late 2000s, right? It just kind of died. There was no real interest anymore. Gaming evolved, and I think that was fine. And I guess a lot of people were asking, like, is there a market for a game like this, including from Microsoft, Phil Spencer, who I think did make some kind of statement about not being sure if there's an audience for a game like this anymore. Funnily enough, Playtonic Games kickstarted a Banjo-Kazooie spiritual successor called Yooka-Laylee, right? I was a Kickstarter, and that team, Playtonic, was made up of the Rare team that originally made Banjo-Kazooie. That game I thought was really good, personally. I thought it captured the spirit of Banjo-Kazooie pretty well. I know it got really mixed reviews. I didn't think it was bad as everyone else did, but I think it showed that there was a dedicated market for it. And I think now, with indie gaming being so big, like, you can take more risks with games like this, I think, especially with a well-known IP like Banjo-Kazooie. So I do think there would be some commercial appeal of making this game. And if that doesn't prove it, I think here's the other thing that to me shows why these characters, Banjo Kazooie, are still culturally very relevant, very well liked. Even if it is predominantly for nostalgia, I do think there is a case to be made for them being really relevant, and that is them being in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as one of the DLC fighters. This was years ago. This was the best day of my life when the trailer came out showing that Banjo-Kazooie were going to be playable in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, because I'd wanted that since the original game on Nintendo 64. And I think Smash Bros. And Masahiro Sakurai, the creator, are really good at identifying what's relevant, what the fan base wants, both the new, the younger fan base, and the older installed fan base, right? That's why a lot of the characters in that game, the new characters, were like legacy characters, right? You had King K. Rool. You had Simon and Richter Belmont. You had Banjo Kazooie, Terry Bogard, Kazuya from Tekken, all kind of legacy characters that the older fans would have loved. And I was so stoked that Banjo was in the game. And I think there's this increased relevance and just an increased awareness of these characters from them being featured in that game that I think gives even more merit for someone to at least try and make a new Banjo game. And I guess the collect-a-thon genre has kind of come back a little bit in the last few years. I mean, Super Mario Odyssey was basically that. That was a phenomenal game. And I think if they could make a Banjo game kind of following the philosophy of that game's design, which, you know, that game feels like, to me, the true sequel to Super Mario 64. Of course, there was Super Mario Sunshine and there was Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, and they were sort of the mainline Mario games of their respective generations, but Odyssey felt like really like what Super Mario 64 was, and I think you could do a Banjo-Kazooie game like that. The funniest part is that at the end of Banjo-Tooie, the sequel game on the 64, there is a cutscene in which the villain Gruntilda tells the characters that she'll get them back in Banjo-Threeie. Of course, Banjo-Threeie never eventuated. I don't count Nuts and Bolts as Banjo-Threeie. So I think if this game does happen and does come out, it should be called Banjo-Threeie, but I think they won't call it that to make it more marketable. They'll just call it like Banjo-Kazooie Return to Spiral Mountain or something like that, right? Even though I really do think it should be called Banjo-Threeie to pay tribute to that line, I don't think it will because it's been too long. But it does feel like there always was a plan to make a follow-up game. It just never happened for a multitude of reasons, but I think now is the time. Do I think these rumors are true? I'm not sure. I think it would work. I would play it, I would talk about it, and I would love it. I love them in Smash. These characters mean a lot to me. I think Yooka-Laylee was a good example of that game type existing in modern times, and Super Mario Odyssey as well. What do you think? I would love to know your thoughts on this. Would you play it? Should it be called Banjo-Threeie? Otherwise, what should it be called? And for the hardcore fans, what other moves or abilities do you think you would want to see in this game? Because of course, Banjo-Tooie introduced a bunch of new abilities. What else could they do with these characters? Let me know. Subscribe to my channel and I'll see you in another video.